I never imagined betrayal could come from both the person you trusted like a brother and the woman you built a life with. Maybe that's why it hit me so hard, because I never saw it coming. My best friend, Daniel, had been in my life since we were both 12 years old. We survived school fights together, grew our careers side by side, and when I married Claire, he was my best man. He held my daughter, Emily, when she was only minutes old. I trusted him with my family. I trusted him with everything, but trust doesn't mean anything when the people you love decide to turn it into a weapon. It all started with small things: Claire pulling away from me emotionally, Daniel dropping by our house a little too often when I wasn't home, and Emily, now 19, acting strangely around him. I assumed it was just teenage awkwardness. Daniel always joked that Emily reminded him of a younger version of Claire. Back then, I thought it was just a compliment. Now I see it for what it was: foreshadowing. The first real crack appeared one night when I came home earlier than expected. Claire was startled to see me, as if she wasn't expecting me at all. She smelled like a different cologne, one I didn't own. I brushed it off, telling myself I was overthinking, but deep down, something felt wrong. The real blow came weeks later. I had borrowed Daniel's old laptop to check a work file. He told me it was wiped clean and safe to use. He lied. One click, and I found a folder buried under layers of renamed files. Inside was a series of messages, hundreds of them, between him and Claire. Messages that were explicit, intimate, filled with plans, memories, and things I didn't want to imagine. Pictures, too. Things that burned into my brain the second I saw them. My hands shook. My chest tightened. My breath felt trapped inside me. I wasn't just reading infidelity, I was reading strategy. They had been planning this. Meeting in hotels. Pretending to be family friends, while laughing about how blind I was. And worst of all, they were planning a future together, but what destroyed me wasn't Claire. It was what I found next. A second folder. This time full of conversations between Daniel and Emily. My daughter, flirting. Late night messages. Confessions. He was manipulating her, charming her, telling her things a man his age should never say to a teenager. And Emily, confused, insecure, desperate for validation, fell into his trap. It wasn't her fault. She didn't know who he really was. She didn't know he was using her, just like he used everyone. I felt the world collapse under me. Anger like fire. Hurt like acid. Shame, guilt, regret, all of it crashing together. That night, I made a decision that I would destroy him, not with fists. Not with yelling, but with a plan so perfectly calculated that he would never recover. Thermo-Nuclear revenge, and it had already begun. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was pretending I didn't know anything. Every morning, I woke up beside Claire, acting like my world hadn't been burned to ashes. Every evening, I sat at the dinner table with Emily, forcing myself not to let her see the storm inside me. I needed time. I needed information. And most importantly, I needed to understand just how deep Daniel's manipulation ran. I started with Emily. Gently, casually, I asked her about her day, about the people she talked to, about school. She was guarded at first, but I noticed something. The moment I mentioned Daniel, her eyes flickered. A mixture of confusion, guilt, and something like nervous excitement. It was the kind of reaction someone gives when they think they're in love. That's when I realized how far he'd gone. He hadn't just seduced my wife. He had emotionally hijacked my daughter. The anger almost cracked through my calm face, but I swallowed it. If I exploded too early, everything would fall apart. And if Daniel sensed even a hint of suspicion, he would vanish before I could execute my plan. Next, I focused on Claire. Her lies were sloppy: late-night work meetings, sudden shopping trips where she returned with nothing, showers lasting far too long. She didn't even try to hide the way she smiled whenever Daniel's name came up. The love in her eyes wasn't for me anymore. She was dreaming of a new life, one she believed he would give her. Let her dream. It would make the fall even harder. I spent nights gathering evidence. I copied messages, screenshots, photos, voice recordings, everything. I didn't rush. Patience was my weapon. I created backups, encrypted drives, offline copies. If anything happened to my devices, I still had the proof. While collecting evidence, I discovered something else: Daniel had money problems. Serious ones. Gambling debts, failed investments, and a near-empty bank account. He wasn't just stealing my wife emotionally, he was planning to use her financially. He had suggested that she deserved better, that she should have more freedom, that she could live beautifully if she chose the right man. Sickening, but I realized something crucial: Daniel wasn't just a cheater. He was a parasite. A manipulator who latched onto anyone he could drain. That meant I could trap him. One night, while Claire slept, her phone buzzed with a message from him: soon. I promise. We just have to be careful. It made my skin crawl, but it also gave me exactly what I needed. They were preparing to run away together. Interesting. The next day, I pretended nothing was wrong and invited Daniel over for a barbecue, just like old times. He arrived with that fake smile, embracing me like a brother, asking about my work, my health, my life. Every word tasted like poison, but I played my role perfectly, because I needed one final piece of the puzzle: how far he would go, and how much he trusted that he'd already won. That he had no idea that by stepping into my house that evening, he had already walked into the opening stage of his own destruction. Daniel walked into my home that evening like he owned it. He handed Emily a small gift bag, something cute, something friendly, something deeply inappropriate coming from a man his age. Emily smiled shyly, unaware of the monster behind the kindness. Claire, on the other hand, couldn't hide the spark in her eyes. When she saw him, her entire face changed, softened, brightened, opened. I memorized that expression. It would be important later. I grilled food while everyone chatted behind me. But I wasn't listening to the words, I was studying body language. Daniel leaned closer to Claire every chance he got. Claire laughed too hard at his jokes. Emily looked uncomfortable when they stood too close. And Daniel's eyes kept drifting toward her when he thought nobody was watching. That I didn't feel jealousy. I didn't feel heartbreak. That I felt calculation. As the night went on, I poured Daniel drink after drink, not enough to make him sloppy, just enough to loosen his tongue. He always bragged when he felt confident. And he felt very confident that night. Man, he said, leaning back in his chair, you're lucky to have a family like this. I smiled. Yeah, I know. You really trust me with them, don't you? He asked, laughing in a way that wasn't really a joke, more like a test. I trust you more than anyone, I replied smoothly. He grinned. A sickening, victorious grin. That was all the confirmation I needed. After dinner, Claire suggested staying outside for a bit, just the two of them, claiming she needed help cleaning up. Emily went inside first, and I followed her, using the excuse of putting leftovers away, though my real intention was to check her phone. She had locked it, but she wasn't tech-savvy. 5 guest passwords later, I was inside. The messages were sickening: Daniel pretending to mentor her, complimenting her looks, telling her she was mature for her age, offering to talk anytime. Grooming 101. And Emily, she thought he cared about her. She had no idea he was using her feelings as leverage against her own mother. I put her phone back exactly how it was and took a deep breath. This wasn't just revenge anymore, it was protection. When I returned outside, Claire and Daniel were whispering. They didn't notice me at first. Daniel's hand was on her waist. Claire's hand rested on his chest. They were talking about timing, when Claire would finally leave me, when Daniel would take care of Emily, the three of them starting fresh. My stomach tightened, not from pain, but from clarity. They weren't just sneaking around. They were planning to erase me completely, but that was perfect, because the bigger their plan was, the harder they would crash. I stepped outside casually, pretending I heard nothing. They jumped away from each other like teenagers caught misbehaving. Everything okay? I asked lightly. Daniel smiled. Yeah, just talking. Good, I said, because I had just decided exactly how I would destroy him. and step 1 began the moment he left my house. The moment Daniel drove away that night, I started phase 1 of my plan. Revenge isn't about anger, it's about precision. And precision requires patience, timing, and information. Fortunately, I had all three. The first thing I did was follow the digital trail. Claire had grown careless. She left her laptop open more often, assuming I wasn't paying attention. One night when she fell asleep on the couch, her laptop buzzed with a new message. I knew her password years ago, she never changed it. Inside the chat, she and Daniel were discussing something that made my blood freeze and burn at the same time. Once we leave, he'll give up. He's not the type to fight. He'll survive. He's strong. We deserve to be happy. He'll understand eventually. No. I wouldn't understand. And they were never going to be happy. As I scrolled, I came across another message, this one about Emily. Daniel had written, "She's already attached to me. When we're out of the picture, I'll help her through it. She trusts me more than him anyway." My vision went red for a moment. Not because of jealousy, because of fear. Daniel wasn't planning a life with Claire. He was planning to control both her and Emily. He needed to be stopped carefully, legally, and permanently. So, the next day, I contacted a lawyer, quietly, privately, using a different email and a prepaid phone. I explained everything. The lawyer told me to gather more evidence, especially anything that showed grooming, manipulation, and emotional abuse. I already had that, but I wanted more. I installed a small recording device under Claire's car seat. I placed another one in the living room lamp. Claire and Daniel loved talking when they thought I wasn't home. It took only 2 days before I had the recordings I needed, him telling her how adorable Emily looked, Claire nervously telling him to be careful, him responding with, "Relax, she needs guidance." Disgusting. Every file I collected, messages, photos, audio, I backed up in 6 different places. Cloud storage, encrypted drives, USB sticks hidden in my toolbox. If one failed, I still had everything. Then came the part one had been preparing for since the moment I discovered the truth. I needed Claire to confess something directly to me, something emotional and raw. So I created the perfect scenario. One evening, I told her that I had been feeling distant and wanted us to reconnect. I suggested we take a weekend trip together, just the two of us. She froze. Panic flashed in her eyes. That was the moment I knew she had been planning to leave very soon. She stuttered through excuses, work, timing, money, and every lie. Cracked her voice a little more. I gently asked, "Claire, are you happy with me?" She couldn't look at me. Her silence was the confession I needed. Finally, she whispered, "I don't know anymore." But I did know. She was gone. Emotionally. Mentally. Physically, and that was perfect, because I needed her to pull away, so she wouldn't see the trap closing around her lover. By the time she went to bed, I had everything in place, and the next phase of my revenge would make sure Daniel never saw daylight the same way again. Daniel never saw the shift in my behavior, which told me I was playing my role better than I expected. I acted calm. Quiet. Even a little defeated. People like him always underestimate silence. They think it means weakness. But silence is where plans are crafted and executed. 2 days after Claire's hesitant confession, I sent Daniel a message from my work phone, "Need help with something this weekend. Can you spare an hour?" He replied instantly, like he'd been waiting for an excuse to come around again. "Of course, brother. Anything." Perfect. Meanwhile, Claire grew increasingly jumpy. She was texting more, smiling at her phone, leaving rooms to answer calls. I let her do whatever she wanted. The more careless she became, the easier this was for me. Emily, however, worried me more. She had started dressing differently, wearing makeup she never wore before, and asking if she could go to study sessions. Each time, I subtly checked her messages. Daniel was still manipulating her, telling her she was special, that he understood her better than anyone. Rage twisted inside me like a blade, but I kept my expression neutral. She wasn't the enemy. She was just another one of his victims. That Friday night, Claire told me she would be meeting a friend from work. I nodded, pretending not to notice she dressed as if she were going on a date. After she left, I checked the tracker I had quietly placed in her car weeks before. She didn't go to meet a coworker, she drove to Daniel's apartment. That I took a slow breath and smiled coldly. They thought they were clever. They weren't. That I didn't go after her. That would ruin everything. Instead, I opened my laptop, pulled up the folder of files, screenshots, and recordings, and prepared step 1 of Daniel's public downfall. That I drafted an anonymous email with attachments and scheduled it to send to several important recipients Monday morning. Daniel's boss, his HR department, the college where Emily studied, since Daniel sometimes volunteered there, Claire's sister, Emily's counselor, and most importantly, Daniel himself. I didn't include everything. Not yet. Just enough to start the fire. The next morning, I invited Daniel over as planned. He showed up confident, almost glowing, the kind of glow that comes from thinking he was about to win something he didn't deserve. "Thanks for helping," I said casually as we walked to the backyard. "Anytime," he replied, clapping my shoulder like he hadn't destroyed my family. That I handed him a box to carry. "Careful. Fragile." He laughed. "Just like you," he joked. That I smiled. A real smile this time, one he didn't understand, because inside that box wasn't anything fragile. That it was a hidden microphone, and I was about to get the last piece of evidence I needed. That I guided the conversation carefully. I asked him how things were with women these days, teased him about being single, nudged him in ways he didn't even notice. He started bragging after just 15 minutes, alcohol-free, just high on arrogance, and then he said the line that completed my plan. "You know, man, some girls like older guys. Like Emily. She's into me. And Claire. She's already mine." I looked right at him, keeping my voice steady. "Is that so?" He laughed, unaware that those words would destroy his entire life. Within hours, he would lose everything. But first, I needed Claire to see the truth, and that moment was coming sooner than she expected. Claire came home that evening glowing in a way she tried to hide. She smelled like perfume she never wore for me anymore. She rushed upstairs before saying more than 2 words, probably to text him, probably to tell him how perfect their future looked. I didn't stop her. I didn't confront her. I simply sat at the dining table, waiting for the clock to hit 7:00 p.m. because at exactly 7 o'clock, the email I scheduled earlier, the one with the first wave of evidence, landed in dozens of inboxes. Down the hall, I heard her phone buzz. Once. Twice. Then non-stop. She came out of the room pale, gripping her phone like it was burning her hand. When she spoke, her voice shook. What did you do?" She didn't ask if I sent something. She already knew I knew everything. That I stood slowly. "I didn't send anything to you." Her breaths turned sharp. Daniel just called me. He said everything is blowing up. His job, the school, people are calling him a predator." I tilted my head. "Isn't he?" Her mouth fell open. She didn't deny it. She couldn't. The truth was already spreading faster than she could think. "Where's Emily?" I asked. Claire blinked. "What? Why?" "Because Daniel didn't just cheat with you," I said, stepping closer. "He was grooming our daughter." Claire shook her head violently. No, that's not true." I pulled out my phone and clicked play on one of the recordings. Daniel's voice filled the room. "Emily's already attached to me. She'll come with us. She trusts me more than him." Claire slapped her hand over her mouth. Tears streamed instantly, but I felt nothing. "That part of me was already dead." "You protected him," I said quietly. "You defended him. You planned a future with him. You didn't even see what he was doing right under your nose, to our daughter." Her knees weakened. She collapsed onto the couch, sobbing, shaking, whispering apologies that came far too late. But this wasn't about punishing her, this was about finishing what I started. That I left her crying and walked upstairs to Emily's room. She looked up when I entered, scared and confused. "Dad, people are saying things online." "They're saying Daniel." I sat beside her and gently took her hands. "Emily, Listen to me. You didn't do anything wrong. He manipulated you. He used you. And now everyone will know who he really is. Her eyes widened in horror. She whispered, "Did Mom know?" I didn't answer that. Some truths wound deeper than betrayal. Instead, I pulled her into a hug. This was the first time I'd held her like this in years. "You're safe now," I murmured. "I promise." Downstairs, Claire was calling Daniel over and over, but he wasn't answering. His world was already collapsing: the emails, the HR complaints, the screenshots forwarded to every contact he had, and the final blow was still coming, because I had also sent the full evidence packet, with his confession, the recordings, and messages, to a police detective who owed me a favor. That night, as police officers knocked on his apartment door and neighbors recorded everything from their windows, I sat on the porch, watching the quiet street. My revenge wasn't explosive. It was precise. It was irreversible. It was thermonuclear, and it was done.